beautiful.
Hello lovers of the world, this is Cinta speaking. I love reading. If you're familiar with my channel, that may come as a surprise to you though, because at this point, I've only really published 3 videos about books, but recently I started a new project that got me back into reading, and while I kind of sporadically make videos about books in the past, now that it's the start of 2024, I thought it would be a good time to start making more in the future. So it would be a great start to introduce myself to the rest of BookTube. So in this video, I will be answering some basic newbie booktuber tag questions so you can get to know me better and learn more about my own reading habits. First question is, why did I start this channel? This question is more so directed at YouTubers who have just started a channel for the first time, and not really for somebody like me who already has a channel but is just joining BookTube this year. In general, I started this channel because I wanted an outlet for my writing, and I also wanted to improve my skills as a communicator. If you look through my videos, you'll find that a lot of what I make is focusing on music, specifically K-pop, because that's kind of my passion at this moment. But when I started this channel, it was never a goal to stick to music only. So you'll find that I also talk about movies, sometimes books. I also make vlogs and sometimes video essays when I have the bandwidth to make them. Because ultimately, the goal of the channel had been to find something that I loved and to share that love with everybody else. I want to join BookTube so that I'm encouraged to read more, because while I do read a lot for work, for my studies, I find that my own hobby as a reader has been pushed to the back in favor of reading for research. And I want to change that, so yeah. Next question is, what is unique about this channel? So I would consider my channel to be an eclectic mix of different topics. As I mentioned, I talk a lot about music, so I have a lot of music reviews, some music video reactions, some video essays about music. I also talk about some films that I really liked, although I'm not well versed in film critique. And in the future, I want to make more book review videos. If you subscribe to this channel, you will not just be getting book content, you will be getting everything else in between. Hopefully that's appealing to you, but if not, I totally understand. The next question is, what am I most excited about this channel? So I'm mostly looking forward to building my skills more and more. As I said, I focus mostly on music and sometimes movies. Therefore, my ability to think critically about books will definitely get better when I start uploading more videos about them, because then I'll be challenged to be able to explain my ideas more clearly and more concisely, and to look at the books that I consume in a different light. Why do I love reading? If you asked me this question at different points in life, I would probably answer in a different way each time. When I was younger, in high school or younger, I felt that life was really boring and frustrating. So reading at the time was a great way to escape the mundanity of that. I was really disinterested in the real world, and I always preferred a different reality. And I was also really shy and had trouble connecting with other people. So reading kind of gave me an opportunity to connect with people, even if they were fictional characters. So in that way, I loved reading for the escapism that it provided. As I grew older, I felt more comfortable with the world I was living in and got better at connecting with different people. So I kind of lost the desire to read fiction as much as I did, because there was just no pressing need for it as before. I just had better things to do. I was quite lonely growing up. So when I had that first taste of friendship, I chased after it wholeheartedly and relished in the fact that I was busy and sought after by other people, which didn't really leave a lot of time and room for reading as often, because I would always be outdoors rather than staying in my room all day as I used to do. This was also when I was in university and I had to do a lot of required reading for classes, and so I began to associate reading with work. Once that connection is made, it's hard to find a time to read for pleasure. However, I was still taking classes that I was interested in, so even though reading was work, when I read, I still learned about new things. So in that sense, I loved reading because I was able to soak up more of the world that I was finally excited to be in. And then, as with all good things, it ended and the pandemic hit. So once I was in lockdown, there was only really so much you could do, and I started reading again. Fortunately, my pandemic experience was better than most, and I mostly just stayed indoors all day. However, it was still stressful to do uni and to be cooped up indoors to do nothing. I loved reading because it gave me a distraction from the heaviness of real life. So much of what I saw on social media was just the heaviness of existing during the pandemic. But now at the age of 25, my answer to why I love reading is that I feel that it helps me understand people and the world better. Helps me understand why people are the way that they are. Even if they are fictional, I feel that I become more empathetic when I read more. Even though the characters I read are fictional, I feel that I have a stronger understanding of why human beings are the way that they are. The next question is, what are my favorite books? Now, I actually have a lot of favorite books, but to save myself some time, I will only show you and talk about my favorite books that I also happen to own physical copies of. And I'll talk about them in the order of when I had first initially read them for the first time. So the first book is Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close by Jonathan Safran Foer. Now, I read this when I was 13 or 14 years old. This was one of the very first books I read when I first arrived in New Zealand. The prose of this book informed my tastes in writing, not just with books, but also with music and lyrics, I think. I haven't actually read this in a long time, and I think I should reread this because I would love to see how I would respond to it now that an entire decade has passed since the first time I read it. But I really can't talk about my reading journey without talking about this book. This book is about this 9-year-old named Oscar. And when I first read it, I didn't realize that he was supposed to be written as autistic. I think it would be a very interesting experience to read it again with that knowledge. And this is basically his journey of coping with the loss of his dad, who died in 9/11. The next book I'll talk about is Adverbs by Daniel Handler. Now, Daniel Handler is the real name of Lemony Snicket of A Series of Unfortunate Events fame. And that's basically the reason why I picked up this book, because I wanted to see what his other books were like if he wasn't writing as Lemony Snicket. This book is about all the ways that we love through adverbs, and that's why it's called Adverbs. This novel is about love, and it features a cast of very eclectic characters. Daniel Handler also writes in a very stream of consciousness way, kind of similar to what he wrote as Lemony Snicket, but since this is not written for children, I would describe the writing to be more like a river of consciousness, because the prose kind of just takes you along with it, and I felt like I was just floating through the stories as if peering through the edge of a boat and seeing the murky shadows underwater. That's how I would describe the writing, as if you're reading about these people's lives from a distance, but at the same time, you are exposed to so much of their intimate lives. I like this book because it's so melodramatic and all the characters are very unhinged, and I don't know, something about it just feels very cathartic to read. And there's no plot to the book, just vibes. So don't read this if that doesn't sound appealing to you. But to me, I really like this, and it really informs the way I think about love since I read this when I was a teenager. And then my third pick is The Paper Menagerie and Other Stories by Ken Liu. This is a collection of short stories. Some are magic, some are sci-fi based, but ultimately I would say Ken Liu is very speculative fiction. The titular story, The Paper Menagerie, made me cry at my kitchen table at 3 a.m. when I was 18 years old. So I will never forget that feeling of sobbing, and the house was all quiet and just being shaken to my core by the story. And then this fourth book is not actually one of my favorites per se, but I just wanted an excuse to talk about them and recommend it to somebody else. So it's called Smaller and Smaller Circles by F.H. Batacan. And I actually found this book when I first went to the Philippines in 2018. It was the first time I had visited the Philippines since I left it when I was 12 years old. And this is a serial killer thriller mystery. It features two detectives. Both of them are priests. They made a movie, and this is the two actors who played the detectives. I like this book for a lot of reasons. Number one, obviously the sentimental value of it, of finding this book set in the Philippines on my first trip back to the Philippines. I like the philosophical discussions about religion, about poverty, about the institutions and the systems that fail us in the Philippines. One of the most memorable things about this book to me was how it handled the deaths of the victims, because since it's a serial killer mystery, there are multiple people who died But I think the book handles their deaths in a really significant way by making you feel the loss of their life in the world so deeply, and what they could have been as people if they, didn't die, and also the people that are left behind to pick up the pieces now that they're gone. So I just thought that was very compelling. So I would really recommend this book to people. And then my last pick is something I had read very, very recently, as early as 2 weeks ago, actually. It's Death on the Nile by Agatha Christie. I love Agatha Christie. I've read so many of her books, and I would say she's one of my favorite authors ever. This is just one of her best books, if not her best book ever. I have a lot more to say about this book, but I will dedicate an entire video to that. So look out for that in the future. But I would really recommend this, and I definitely think this is better than Murder on the Orient Express. That's my hot take. And it is a million bajillion times better than the Kenneth Branagh movie adaptation. So don't watch that. Read the book instead. Thank you. I do have a lot more faves, but again, let's just save some time and I'll talk about more of them in the future probably. Next question is, what book got me into reading? So much like a lot of children all over the world, I fell in love with A Series of Unfortunate Events by Lemony Snicket. I actually have the full collection somewhere in our garage, but we haven't been able to find it since we moved houses about 4 years ago. But it's definitely there, and hopefully I find it soon because I'm really proud of having the full collection. It's just an amazing series, and I don't think anybody will argue with me on that. Next question is, what challenges do you think starting a booktube channel will be hardest to overcome? Personally, I'm really scared of book fans coming into my comments to tell me that my opinions suck. So my challenge to overcome would be to just develop a thicker skin so that I have more strength in my convictions. Like, if I don't like something, I should be able to say it freely and not be so scared of what other people will say in response to my opinions. But I'm really a sensitive person, so hopefully I can kind of overcome that once I start posting more book reviews in the future. Next question is, when did I start reading? I would say when I was 8 to 10 years old, when I was still living in the Philippines. My mom forced me to prioritize learning English over learning Tagalog, which is the main dialect in our household. Growing up, it was really hard for me to interact with kids my age because not only was I shy at that age, I also found it difficult to communicate with them since I was not fluent in Tagalog. So I retreated into myself, and to occupy my time, I would read more books. And reading books killed two birds with one stone. Obviously, it helped me improve my English, but it also kept me company when I was often left to my own devices. However, the more I read English stories, the worse my Tagalog got. And so the shyer I became. So it was kind of like this weird feedback loop of like, the more books I read, the less time I spent with other people. So where do I read? Now, I usually read in my room. And the thing is, I usually have spare time to read for fun during the summer when university is out for the holidays. Usually around that time, I would usually stay at home. Aside from the occasional hanging out with friends, I would spend most of my time in my room. And so I would read in my room. And I also would listen to audiobooks while I'm doing something else because I kind of prefer keeping my hands busy while listening to something else in the background than like sitting down with a book and just reading for extended periods of time. The most recent time I did that was with Death on the Nile because I really wanted to try what it was like to annotate. This is my idea of annotating. I like to listen to audiobooks when I'm editing videos. If it doesn't require me listening to audio, I would edit B-roll, or I would make thumbnails for future videos, or I would scrapbook or journal just to keep my hands occupied. But hopefully when I do start going back to work and going to classes again, that I will also find time to listen to audiobooks, maybe on my commute or just whenever I have spare time to myself. What genres do I like to read? I would say that my top 3 favorite genres are murder mysteries, speculative fiction, and nonfiction, because I've read so much nonfiction for work and research that I can't not put that on the list. But yeah, I love murder mysteries. I have a pretty decent collection of murder mystery books that I will show you later. As for speculative fiction, I kind of learned that term when I started reading a lot of Neil Gaiman and Kazuo Ishiguro. I wouldn't say that Kazuo Ishiguro is one of my favorite authors, He's definitely on my top faves, I would say. But that kind of storytelling, I think, is very compelling. It's kind of like in between sci-fi and fantasy almost. But I feel like the person that best describes speculative fiction is like Neil Gaiman. He's probably my favorite author because of how much time I spent reading his stories. I read the Sandman series in high school, and that was really impactful to me. I also read a lot of his short stories, and Good Omens is an incredible book. I'm sure everybody can agree to that. And I purposefully didn't include any of his books in my earlier list of favorites because I felt like it would be such an insult to my relationship to his writing and work if I only chose one book. So that's why. But Neil Gaiman is definitely one of my favorite authors ever. What does your book collection look like? Back when I was a teenager reading a lot, I would often just borrow books from the library. I never bought any because obviously I didn't have disposable income to purchase so many books. So even now, I would borrow books from the library or borrow the audiobooks from the library. I kind of developed this fear of buying books at full price in case I read them and find that I actually didn't like the book at all, and I would be like, oh my god, I spent so much money on a book. But another thing is that I developed a habit of buying books secondhand, whether that's at secondhand bookstores or at the op shops that my family and I would often go to. So because of that, my book collection isn't that flashy. A lot of them are old copies and some of them are quite damaged, but I'm a collector at heart and I love the idea of having the physical copy in my bookshelf, and it makes it even more satisfying to find it by chance at a thrift store or a secondhand store. So I'll just give you a quick tour of my bookshelf. The top shelf is entirely murder mysteries. I decided to do that on purpose because I thought it would be fun to have all of my murder mystery books in the same shelf. Here are all my Agatha Christie books. Obviously, I haven't read all of them, but I will hopefully soon. The second and third shelf is my movie and music collection. I do collect K-pop albums, so I have an entire shelf dedicated to that. But I also have CDs from other artists, and I also started building up my collection of DVDs and VHS that I was able to find at secondhand stores. The fourth shelf contains all of my books that are not murder mystery. So I have my stack of Kazuo Ishiguro books, and I also started collecting a lot of Isaac Asimov books, even though I haven't read a lot of his books before. I just have them. And then lastly, at the bottom are my nonfiction books, where most of them I rescued from my university's garbage bin when there was a time when they were clearing out a lot of rooms and a lot of the lecturers wanted to clean out their offices. So I managed to save a lot of these from there. And I also have my battered secondhand classics I happen to find throughout the years that I've been collecting books. The last question is, if you could write a book about anything, what would it be? I'm actually writing one right now. I kind of write it on and off just whenever I have the bandwidth to think about them. So the book is, unsurprisingly, a murder mystery set in a world where magic exists, but it's treated like science and integrated into daily life. So the story is about a detective who is commissioned to solve the murder of a prolific scientist and scholar on this island that had suffered a near ecological collapse after this plant disease kind of destroyed their main export, which is just fruit. So I've been working on that like kind of on and off for the past few years. Hopefully I have more time to think about that soon, but I don't have a lot of hope because I will be starting my PhD. If my PhD goes anything like how my master's had gone, I will not be thinking about anything else for the next 3 years. But we'll see. And then, just for fun, before my camera battery dies, I did want to show you my reading journal. I started this reading journal like either 2 years ago or just last year. It's literally just a notebook that I found at a secondhand store. And I decorated it with this sticker. It says enemies to lovers, and it's this book with like a sword through it. Ironically enough, I actually really hate the enemies to lovers trope. I hate it in romance, I hate it in everything, but I just liked the design of the sticker so much because it's so beautifully illustrated that I couldn't resist buying the sticker. So if you open it up, you've got my name, and it's a very simple reading journal. So I just have my table of contents here with each book's title in a different color, just to differentiate them from each other. I started writing the dates of when I started the book and when I finished it only recently, as early as like last month. And then the black check mark on the side indicates that I've finished typing up the notes for that book, because I like to handwrite my notes first and then kind of transfer them to my laptop whenever I'm about to start fleshing out the script of like a book review video. Very simple, not really much. Sometimes I decorate with stickers if I feel like it. Yeah, not too flash, but I wanted to show you guys this anyway because I've been reading a lot more, and so I've been using this a lot more as well. And that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to hit the like button. I'd love to hear from you who your favorite booktubers are. Of course, I've been following a few already, but I would love to hear more recommendations because I just like to kind of hear what other people are thinking about the books that I read. If you want to see more of my work, please feel free to subscribe. All of my social media links are down in the description if you want to follow me there, as well as my Patreon and Ko-fi pages if you want to support me financially. Otherwise, I look forward to sharing my love with you guys next time. I'll see you soon!